Everybody tells us to find balance when we're in recovery, but what I want to talk about today is what if balance is the wrong word to be using entirely. It's still something I'm wrestling with, and I want to try and iron out a few things with you during this video. You know, firstly, when I came into recovery, I was obsessed with whatever it might be, and on any given day I can be obsessed with this, that and the other. And then I became a bit obsessed with finding balance. And I've even made a video about finding balance, you know, and obsessing about that instead. And it was a bit tongue-in-cheek, but it's worth a watch anyway, just to see what I was talking about then. And now what I want to try and do is frame recovery and creativity as more of a rhythm than about finding balance. And so yeah, today I'm going to dig into that a little bit. For me, like, chasing balance hasn't felt impossible, but at times it's felt a bit too rigid and constricting for the creative nature of me and my being. You know, and I've really tried very hard to fit within this framework of balance. I'm trying every day to stay away from the framework of obsession, which I don't think is very healthy. And I think that balance definitely works for a lot of people. But one of the ideas I'm still wrestling with as a creative person in recovery is that perhaps balance is the wrong way for me to frame it in my own mind. And so I'm leaning into this idea of rhythm and cycles a little bit more at the moment. But anyway, regardless of whether or not you feel like balance is appropriate for you, the one thing that balance and rhythm definitely are daily practices. They're not tick box activities. They're not things that can be achieved and done. You know, think of them in the same way that you would think about going to the gym or healthy eating. These are lifestyle changes. You know, they're not just something that we should be doing for a couple of months and then assuming that we're cured or fixed or well. These are just little things we've got to keep chipping away at. So, you know, trying to find a sense of rhythm or perhaps balance is really, really important, and it's a daily practice. The issue I have with balance is that it feels too perfectionistic and it feels too hard to hold together at times for me as a creative person in recovery. And perhaps you're feeling the same way. If so, this video is definitely for you. You know, there's a great metaphor which I do like, which is about spinning plates and about how life is about spinning plates, you know, and each plate obviously represents a different part of our lives, whether that's family, work, interests, being creative, you know, our recovery, definitely, if we are in recovery, is one of the many plates that we need to, quote unquote, keep spinning. But the thing about this metaphor is that inevitably when we start spinning one plate, the other ones stop spinning a bit more. And then we end up like chasing around the plates, spinning, trying to keep them all spinning at once, you know, which is inevitably quite stressful. It really plays into that like perfectionistic part of my brain. And in a broader sense, it's really about like action versus outcome. And I think as creative people in recovery, we have to put the action in, but it's wrong for us to try to control the outcomes. I think we need to leave the outcomes in the hands of whatever it is, like the universe or, you know, this greater idea than us, and people call it all kinds of things, whether it's God or a higher power or the muse or nature or universe. And, you know, necessarily surrendering to the process of recovery as a creative person is about accepting that we are flawed and imperfect, and we're not going to be able to keep this perfect balance, you know, throughout our entire lives. And so I think thinking about rhythm a little bit more is becoming a very helpful way for me to think about my own life and my own creative practice and my own recovery journey as well. And so balance is like static, perfectionistic, and hard to hold and hard to keep it going at a level. Whereas rhythm for me is about movement, it's about flow, it's about ups and downs, it's about natural cycles and accepting that we are perfectly imperfect, accepting that like nature we go through seasons, and accepting that like blades of grass we're not all growing directly straight up towards the sun. There's an inevitable crisscrossing, messy chaos, but nature is perfect in its imperfection. And I think this metaphor of being more rhythmic is very, very helpful. And thinking about it today, I've kind of come to realise that it's a bit more like this, a bit more like a river, isn't it, that we're flowing on. You know, we are floating down a river in a boat of some description, let's say a kayak or a canoe. And so we have our paddles or whatever they might be to keep the kayak from capsizing, to stop it from hitting the sides of the river, but we can't actually alter the river itself. And the river is the natural rhythm and flow of our lives. And that feels, in my mind, way more appropriate, you know, as a creative person in recovery, to frame it in that way. And so I think that like my creative process and what I want to talk about now is like how our creative processes mirror rhythm much more than balance. You know, for me, inspiration ebbs and flows. It comes and it goes. It's not something I can really control. You know, for me, putting the action into being creative every day is the goal of the day. As long as I put the action in, like, I am happy that I've achieved that. I've set that rhythm into motion. But what I can't do is control the outcome of that rhythm. You know, I don't know where the river is going. I don't know which way it will meander around the next corner. But what I can do by coming to my studio and painting and writing and having a daily creative practice, which I would definitely recommend, is I can start to steer my boat, you know, along the river and point it in the right direction. For a time, I really obsessed over balance, you know, as I've touched on, and I've alluded to it already in the video, but obsession on the whole, for people in recovery, but particularly for creative people in recovery, is something that we really struggle with. I know I do. I get hyper-fixated on projects and paintings and drawings, whatever they might be, but I also get obsessed with unhealthy ways of thinking, conversations I've had with people, you know, past relationships, potential future relationships with friends, family, colleagues, romantic partners, whatever it might be. And so obsessing over balance in the studio and in life is, yeah, I'm not finding it a very useful way to operate at the moment. And I think coming to terms with accepting what is and accepting that we're on this river is a much more useful way to think about it. You know, and it's really nice to tie this rhythmic idea into music and art. You know, rhythm gives us life. It makes us move. Rhythm in painting allows our eye to dart across the surface and enjoy the colour and the texture, and the beat of the music allows us to move our feet. And I really like that. I think it's a much more beautiful way to view the world. So instead of beating yourself up for not being balanced, think of your recovery journey as a rhythm that we are learning to play, you know. Yeah, I love that. I think it's great. It's made me smile. It's like, yeah, instead of beating yourself up for not being balanced, think of your recovery as a rhythm that you're learning to play. Think of yourself as a kayak canoeist on the river of life. And so, yeah, this week, give it a go. Try and frame it in your own mind try and frame it about rhythm as opposed to balance, and see what happens. You know, see what happens when you lean into and start listening to that natural rhythm of life and reconnecting more to the nature that is all around us. If that spoke to you, let me know. Let me know what you're struggling with, as per usual. Let me know what you think about this whole idea around rhythm versus balance, action versus outcome, control versus surrender, because these are all really important themes that I want to dig into as well. So if you've got any thoughts or comments, yeah, let me know. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, all that good stuff. If this video spoke to you, then let me know, please. I really do appreciate it. So yeah, thank you.